Let's get into it. So much to get to after a wild Tuesday night in the sport. 2 top 5 teams took losses at home. That's not normal. But the place to start, I think most longtime listeners of the Eye on College Basketball podcast would agree, is in Bloomington, where Mike Woodson might have hit rock bottom. The internet is FUBAR. Final score, Illinois 94, Indiana 69, inside Assembly Hall. It's a 25-point beatdown. More specifically, it's the second 25-point beatdown Indiana endured in a span of 4 days. Lost by 25 at Iowa on Saturday, then lost by 25 to Illinois on Tuesday. Fire Woodson chants filled Assembly Hall as Illinois scored more points in regulation than any visiting team had ever scored in a regulation game at Assembly Hall, and as Indiana was also losing consecutive games by 25 points for the first time since November 2008. Norlander, if you have names, provide them, but I don't remember many coaches ever bouncing back once it gets this bad. Do you?
No, this is where we got to start on Wednesday. So much on Tuesday night, and I did not think that Illinois, Indiana, all of Parrish 16 hours ago would be where we were starting, but it's where we have to. You laid it out a lot there. Woodson skipped the post-game team radio, which you don't often get, but typically when that does happen, it is a harbinger of things to come. And the press conference after, I watched the whole thing. It was all 6.5 minutes or so, and it was fine. But he said, quote, "I love our fans. I respect our fans, but it's up to me to get our players to play at a high level. That's my job, and I'm going to continue to work in that area and hope our fans will stay in there with us." I saw a note from our CBS Sports research team that Indiana had never given up 60.5 before last night, which is wild. Indiana is 0-9 in its last 9 games against ranked competition. And then I'm going to repeat a nugget I gave on, I believe, the Sunday show. Credit to Zach Osterman, who does a great job and has for a long time covering this program. 14 of the 35 losses that Woodson has in Big Ten play. He's 39-35 overall, accounting for Big Ten tournament and all that stuff. So 39-35. 14 of those 35 losses, so effectively 40%, have come by at least 15 points. And now you have back-to-back 25-point losses. It's even small stuff that's not so small, but like Illinois is 3-1 in its last 4 games at Indiana. That's Illinois. That's one of your primary rivals. You can't beat them. The only other time that Illinois even got 60 in a game this season was against Chicago State, which when I checked yesterday was the worst team at Ken Pom. So it is not going well at all. This does feel now inevitable. And what's wild is Indiana, and by inevitable, I mean a coaching change. And I'm not saying it's happening this week or next week. I don't think that's happening. I think Indiana can still, and I think it should make the tournament. This is a 13-5 team, but 2 straight losses by 25 points. And you look at the schedule ahead: at Ohio State, at Northwestern, home to Maryland, at Purdue, at Wisconsin, home to Michigan, at Michigan State. Oh, that's the next month. How if Indiana can come out of the other side of that with more wins than losses? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 7 games. Can they come out of that at 4-3? They're 4-3 right now in the league. Can they go 4-3 over their next 7-game stretch? That will determine whether or not this team can get to the NCAA tournament. There's so many issues and factors here. We talked in the preseason. We talked on the Indiana shoot-around episode that the non-conference was simply not good enough. That is now coming to rear its head, because if Indiana can't manage to finish 6th or better in the Big Ten, hard for me to get there on how they're going to be a tournament team. They're projected, as I'm sure you're aware, GP, I'm actually just seeing it now because I brought up their Ken Pom page, projected to go 8-12 in the league and 17-14 overall. Will be nowhere close to the bubble if that's the case. So this does feel inevitable. It feels like the fan base. Tuesday night was the moment when, although Woodson is going to continue to coach here for the games and weeks ahead, presumably, it feels like the moment that he will not come back from. The fan base is ready to move on, and it's just a matter of when and how we get there.
You mentioned, can they go 4-3 in the next 7? I mean, maybe. I wouldn't rule anything out. It's college basketball. But according to Ken Pom, they are projected to be underdogs in each of their next 7 games. So to go 4-3, they're going to have to, for the next 7 games, they're going to have to create upsets. There ain't nothing we've seen lately that suggests that's in the cards. I think I'd mentioned on Sunday, we sort of touched on Indiana getting blasted by Iowa. And I'd said, I don't know how Indiana fans are feeling these days. I don't know. It hasn't entered my world lately. And then I had an Indiana fan subsequently tweet me, and it was like, most Indiana fans seem more interested in who's going to be the next coach than they are the games. And that's where we were even before last night happened. So you saw it. I mean, the images were in the videos. I mean, you didn't have to have the best hearing in the world to hear the Fire Woodson chants throughout Assembly Hall. So yeah, it's a 13-5 team, but down to 58th at KenPom, down to 60th in the net, 1-5 in quadrant 1, 1-0 in quadrant 2. So 2-5 in the first two quadrants. Their only quadrant 1 win is Penn State. They were 17th in the preseason AP poll. And I know that some people had concerns about the lack of shooting on the roster, the lack of obvious shooting on the roster. We discussed it on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. And now you fast forward to January 15th, and the numbers are exactly what Indiana fans who had fears, it's exactly what they feared. Indiana is shooting 31.4% from three on the season. That ranks 274th in the country. Only 32.4% of their shots come from three. That ranks 330th nationally. So they spent like $5 million to build a roster and then decided to play like it's 1982. Another disappointing team is the result. Like I mentioned, they're now expected to be underdogs according to KenPom in each of the next 7 games. So this could get way worse before it gets better, and it likely won't get better until another person is in charge of the program.
Yeah, and it's the way it's like I pulled up this game on Peacock last night. It's over before it starts.
Yeah.
It was non-competitive. If it would be one thing if Indiana had lost, like if they had lost it at Iowa and then comes back and loses in Illinois, and both games are competitive, and one's a 3-point loss, one's a 4-point loss, and it's annoying and it's frustrating. It's like, oh, look at the trouble Indiana's in. We'd still probably be having this conversation. We wouldn't be leading the show with it. Is the nature of the past 2 losses. I mean, Illinois only had 6 turnovers in this game. Kylan Boswell went off and had one of his best games as an Illinois player, 22 points. Kasper Yakachonis, by the way, he returns in this one, and there were multiple possessions where he was kind of doing what he wanted to do. And then there was one play in particular that was shared by multiple people that follow the sport and showed the video where transition play, Illinois doesn't get it on the first opportunity, and then they get the ball back, and it's kind of just like a half-baked, not even it's not a half-court play, it's not a transition play. Umar Abalo's defensive effort is absolutely atrocious on it, and it was a microcosm of what the issue is here. They're not getting enough out of Balo. They're not getting enough out of everyone they got in the portal collectively. And again, they're a 13-5 team with issues that extend beyond even how they're playing in the moment. They don't rank top 50 in offensive efficiency. They don't rank top 50 in defensive efficiency. They can't shoot the 3 well, and they are going to have to do over the next month what they have not done yet, and that is overachieve. The best win you mentioned is against Penn State, but they do not have a top 50 win on the schedule. And it's the latest example. And I want to be clear because I often qualify this because I feel it deserves qualification. This is sports. There's no saying that they can't turn it around and suddenly 3 or 4 weeks from now, Indiana is like the surprise story and look what they've been able to do. And suddenly they've won 5 of 6 or 6 of 7. And that would be a phenomenal thing to cover and see if it happened, but it doesn't look likely. And I want to say 9 out of 10 times in sports, college basketball, college football, the NFL, the NBA, whatever it may be, when you hit a point at the end of a season where it feels like your coaching situation doesn't seem tenable for the long term, but at the same time, in that very moment, it seems like it might be a year too soon to make the decision to move off a coach. This is not a scientific statement. It's just going off of, frankly, it's going off of vibes and having covered the sport. GP, I would think you would have to agree with this. 90% of the time, give or take, 85%, 95%, whatever. That winds up being the decision anyway in the ensuing year. Sometimes it'll last another 2 years, but you look back and you're like, was it worth it? Did we really need to do this? And that's exactly where Indiana feels where it is right now. And the irony to all of this is the Archie stuff was very much up and down, obviously. They bring on Woodson. He's a hire that harkens back to the Bob Knight days, and a lot of Quinn Buckner and other players that have a very big say in a lot of this stuff at IU have a big voice in this. But they have not been nearly what they should be for a long, long time. That loss in 2016 in the Sweet 16 when Crean was there to North Carolina was the last time that they had a really, really quality team. But if you want to talk about the last time that Indiana was like high level good, you'd have to go back to 2013. Remember the upset to Syracuse when they were a 1 seed. I mean, it has just been one thing after another. They'll eventually, I do think that eventually they can and will get out of this this vortex of suck, but it is going to take yet another regime, another coaching change, and to get someone in there that can get the job done. You could have taken this head on last season. You chose not to because the context there was it was Woodson's third season, didn't make the tournament 19 and 14, but in year one made the tournament. Year two, which Archie never did, although he would have gone in 2020. Whatever, we're not relitigating that. Year two, I saw him in person. They were a 4 seed. They make it to the second round. They don't live up to seed expectations, but it was 3 seasons with an alum, giving him another season. I understand why that decision was made, but there were people that thought you have a number of candidates that are really good on the board here. If you're Indiana and you want to chase it, why not go after it? They opted against it. Now here's where you find yourself, and you got to climb a very steep hill to reverse this. Otherwise, you're either going to miss the tournament outright, or you're going to get into the tournament as a double-digit seed, and more likely than not even win a game when you get there.
I have strong opinions about that. First, on the vortex of suck, as you put it, as you put the vortex of suck that they've been living and dying in. I keep thinking I'm going to delete this stuff at some point, but it's just been sitting here in my file for years. I take no joy in this, but we're a college basketball podcast, kind of. And I think somewhat. And I think people need to know what we're talking about here, given that this is a blue blood program.
Lay it out.
I mean, as long as you can be a blue blood program without really ever winning anything of significance for decades.
In all seriousness, before you say what you're going to say, we had this conversation at the Final Four when Nova made there. I was like, listen, at a certain point, teams elevate and graduate to blue blood status. Duke didn't really get there, in my opinion, until they won back-to-back national championships. If you can elevate and graduate to it, you can be demoted from it. And well, I'm not going to sit here and slam the table and say Indiana can no longer be a blue blood. If you can get up there, you can fall from it. And with what you're about to say, I mean, it has been a long time. But maybe it speaks to this program's relevancy and the want to of fans, media, people that like college basketball to want to see Indiana matter and be consistent again for that to be the case. But it certainly has not been. So go ahead and inform the folks if they're unfamiliar with the data.
Bro, they won a national title when I was 10. What more do you want? They won the whole thing when I was 10. Look at me now. Think about this. Indiana fans, look at me.
I thought you were referring to 76 when you would have been 10, but I understand. 87.
Indiana fans, look at me. The last time you won a national title, I was 10 years old. Look at me now. This is outrageous. The last time you went to the Elite Eight, I had no kids. Now I got 3. One of them's grown, a foot taller than me, just about. It's an exaggeration, but look at me. Ain't finished in the top 25 at KenPom since 2016. Ain't finished ahead of Purdue in the Big Ten standings since 2016. Ain't made the Elite Eight since 2002. Ain't won a national title since 1987. Year 1 for Mike Woodson, started 30th at KenPom, finished 48th. Year 2 started 12th at KenPom, finished 30th. Year 3 started 50th at KenPom, finished 91st. Year 4 started 42nd at KenPom, currently 58th. Tom Crean's average KenPom finish in his final 6 seasons at Indiana, that was 30th, with 3 top 15 finishes. Tom Crean's final KenPom ranking was 44th. They fired him after 44th, which was just 1 year after an outright Big Ten title. Mike Woodson has been 44th, worse than 44th, in 3 of his 4 seasons in charge. I think I'm going to delete this stuff someday, but I thought that like 2 years ago, 5 years ago. I've been thinking it for a while. And as for like, should you do it when you start thinking about doing it? This is the logic Jeremy Foley, the former Florida athletic director, I think mostly made famous. Like when you start thinking about should you fire somebody, it's time to fire them and move on. I think it's especially true in the Indiana situation because there were more variables in place last season. If you do it last season, you know who's probably your coach right now? You know. Who's coaching Indiana right now if they do it last season?
Probably Dusty May.
Probably Dusty May.
Although I will say that, Louisville being a fishbowl was also a factor in picking Michigan, and Indiana is just as bad. So it's not inconceivable to me that if Indiana was also open, that he wouldn't still be at Michigan. That's all.
Fine. Not inconceivable to me either.
Yeah.
But how about this? Now Indiana fans are going to have to forever think about that. Yep. And no matter what Dusty ever says about it, if you believe he could have been your coach, he ain't nothing he going to say to make you think that's not true. So now you're going to always have that second thing in the air. We stuck with Mike Woodson too long, and it might have cost us Dusty May, who, oh, by the way, is now at a conference rival.
Yeah.
With a top 20 team in year one. And it's
going to lead Wednesday's court report, by the way. Michigan is now the statistical favorite to win the Big Ten as we speak.
Think about that for a second, Indiana fans. You could have led the court report tomorrow if you'd have just done what you were supposed to do.
Not even tomorrow. There we go. Just a little bit of a tea. But as we speak about this, oh, by the way, Michigan is 11th at KenPom, top 20 in the rankings, playing two bigs on a level no other team in the country is. And the guy that you could have chased after, yes, he's doing it in your league. And in my estimation, we'll get more to this once a change is made. I can't see that being the case and him obviously leaving now that he's at Michigan.
Another name that gets brought up now, and then we'll move on.
Yeah.
Assuming Indiana's going to make a coaching change. Scott Drew's name I saw on social media last night. Obviously, he grew up in Indiana, about 3 hours north of Bloomington. How connected is he to that state now? I'm not sure. I believe his father now lives in Phoenix. Bryce obviously lives in Phoenix.
Yes.
I'm just not sure how much the state of Indiana or Indiana basketball means to Scott Drew in the year 2025. So if you're Indiana and you want to, as they say, make the phone call. Make the phone call. It's just a phone call. What do I care? But don't forget, this guy has already turned down Kentucky
and Louisville in the same year. No human had ever done that. So maybe it'll happen. But
right. Yeah, he's already turned down two big jobs. He's gonna have stuff named after him at Baylor. His life's pretty good. Make the phone call if you want to. But I'd also have a backup plan just in case. I'd also have a backup plan just in case.
Yeah, agreed. Well, the Hoosiers, man, they'll continue to be a compelling story no matter what happens here.